When most people think of tornadoes, they think of one place, Oklahoma. However, there's another tornado hotspot that's almost never talked about, Chicago. Chicago is positioned in a unique spot on the southwest side of a large lake, Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan's effect on severe weather and tornadoes is complicated and not entirely understood, but there are some important factors that may be in play. The lake breeze coming off of the lake plays a huge role because it increases low-level shear, which would in turn enhance the chance of tornadoes. However, the cooler water of the lake reduces the temperature of the air, resulting in decreased low-level instability. So when a storm does go over the lake, the storm will likely weaken. These factors suggest that storms more than 5 miles from the lake have an enhanced potential for tornadoes, but storms closer to the lake suffer from reduced instability, decreasing the likelihood for tornadoes to form. This is evident in tornado records as there seems to be an increase in frequency and intensity of tornadoes in the western suburbs near towns like Joliet and Lamont, and a much lower concentration of tornadoes right alongside the lake, although they can obviously still happen there. Now let's take a look at some of the most notable tornadoes to ever occur in the Chicagoland area. First documented tornado to cause major damage in Chicago was an F3 that struck on May 6, 1876. This tornado wrecked many buildings in downtown Chicago, killing 2 and injuring 35 before it swept east over Lake Michigan, with eyewitnesses describing it as a massive multi-vortex tornado as it went over Lake Michigan, crossing right over where Navy Pier is located. Just to rub salt in the wound, the tornado had struck a part of Chicago which had been decimated less than 5 years before by the Great Chicago Fire. Decades later, Chicago was in the middle of a huge tornado outbreak. Palm Sunday, March 28, 1920, more than 30 tornadoes touched down across the Midwest, with several heading straight towards Chicago. At 1:05 p.m. Central Daylight Time, one storm started the onslaught near St. Charles, Illinois. Right as it touched down, the tornado destroyed a farmhouse and numerous barns, killing a father and tossing a baby. Observers reported a well-defined funnel as the tornado moved into downtown Elgin, where the tornado would inflict 8 fatalities and 100 injuries. 3 people died when the rear of a theater collapsed. Many more people could have been killed, but fortunately, church services had been dismissed just minutes before the tornado struck. Roughly 15 minutes after the Elgin tornado formed, another, even more violent tornado began to tear through Joliet, Illinois. The tornado then moved right through the center of Romeoville. Reports vary on whether or not the tornado lifted at this point, or if it was one long-track tornado. Dr. Ted Fujita retroactively concluded that it was in fact 2 tornadoes, with the second tornado touching down in Melrose Park. 10 deaths occurred here when the tornado hit the Sacred Heart Catholic Church as people were preparing for Palm Sunday services. The tornado destroyed 50 more buildings before moving over less populated areas, killing 6 more in the town of Wilmette before passing over Lake Michigan. The closest a tornado came to downtown Chicago was the Stickney F2, which struck between Cicero and the Chicago Midway Airport. It destroyed 8 buildings, including a school, and sucked the roof off of many others. Fortunately, no one was killed. Overall, the 1920 Palm Sunday tornadoes killed 20 in Chicago and injured at least 300. The next time Chicago had a close call with a strong tornado happened a few decades later in the 60s. On March 4th, 1961, at around 5 p.m., the tornado quickly developed near 87th Street and cut a path of destruction as it moved northeast across the city, causing several injuries when a cafe had its roof blown off, trapping a group of diners. Sadly, the tornado killed 1 person when a man was thrown against a building and was impacted by debris. The tornado finally exited town as it moved onto Lake Michigan. Despite only being F2 strength, damage was inflicted to over 3,000 homes, and to make matters worse, 4 days after the tornado struck, Chicago was hit with a snowstorm that dumped over 6 inches of snow, impeding cleanup efforts for the tornado. It wasn't long until the Chicago region was under threat from another tornado outbreak. This date once again landed on Palm Sunday. Across this historic tornado outbreak, one violent tornado touched down in the Chicagoland area, the devastating Crystal Lake F4. The tornado touched down at 3:20 p.m. on the south side of Crystal Lake. It was initially narrow, but quickly intensified and grew in size. As the tornado approached U.S. Route 14, the tornado claimed its first fatality when a barn was destroyed. The tornado then went on to strike the Colby subdivision, destroying or severely damaging 155 homes. 4 deaths occurred in the subdivision, of which 3 were the Holter family. Their bodies were thrown 2 blocks from their obliterated home, where all that remained was a pickup truck laying in the basement. The violent tornado scattered debris from the Colby subdivision up to a half a mile away. In total, the tornado caused 6 fatalities and 75 injuries, and was only one of the many extreme tornadoes that occurred during this historic tornado outbreak, which in total caused 266 fatalities and 3,622 injuries. 2 years later, on April 21st, 1967, Chicago was hit by its deadliest tornado ever. On Friday at 5:15 p.m., when students had just gotten out of school, an employee at the U.S. Weather Bureau observed a rotating wall cloud about 10 miles north of Joliet. Less than 10 minutes later, a tornado touched down at the present-day campus of Moraine Valley. The tornado raced at 60 miles per hour over the intersection of 103rd and Roberts Road, right over the present-day location of the Bridgeview Courthouse, before it then crossed I-294 and Harlem Avenue, where it quickly approached a much more residential area. The tornado began impacting many businesses along U.S. Grant Memorial Highway near the present-day location of Chicago Ridge Mall before it struck the intersection of 95th and Southwest Highway. Here, at this intersection, the tornado was at its deadliest, killing 18. 7 people died in the Fairway Supermart when the roof collapsed onto them. 1 person was killed at the Sherwood Forest Restaurant, 2 at Schutt's Linwood Tavern, 2 waiting at a bus stop, 1 in her own garage, and 2 at the Airway Trailer Park. The rest of the victims were viciously thrown while stopped at the intersection. Simultaneously, the tornado directly impacted the Oak Lawn Community High School, demolishing a large portion of the school. During the chaos, the school's power stopped, freezing the clock at the harrowing moment of impact, 5:31 p.m. The tornado continued northeast at a blistering pace, impacting more residential homes in the Covington School, and then crossed onto Cicero Avenue, where dozens of young children were spending their recreation time after school at the Oak Lawn roller rink. A wall collapsed onto the rink, killing 3 kids. This was also the approximate location where the most famous photo of the tornado was taken, showing its extremely tall stature and the creepy green color of the sky. Right at the same moment, my mom, who was only 9, witnessed the tornado from her backyard, less than a mile away from this deadly beast.
Yeah, it was like a yellowish green, and I saw the tornado and it was like thick, and you could just see stuff, and my mother's like, we gotta get in the basement. And I was like, no, this is cool.
The tornado once again crossed Southwest Highway, then crossing Pulaski Road into St. Mary's Catholic Cemetery, where it spread debris from all the homes onto thousands of gravestones. The tornado continued at its blistering pace of 60 miles per hour, covering a mile every minute, impacting hundreds of homes as it moved along 87th Street, now entering Franklin Park. Here, it destroyed the brick clubhouse at the Beverly Country Club, trapping several people. The tornado then crossed the path of the Southside F2, which happened only 6 years prior. The tornado continued to move along 87th Street, damaging more homes and businesses, although at this point, the tornado was not nearly as strong as it was earlier in its life in Oak Lawn. Even though the tornado had slightly weakened, it was still ongoing and finally moved offshore as a waterspout at Rainbow Beach. Across the 16-mile path, the tornado killed 33 and injured over 1,000. In total, 52 homes were destroyed and another 900 were damaged. The tornado also caused numerous fires across Oak Lawn, resulting in even more damage to the communities. 2 days later, my mom and her family visited their little sister Janine's grave, which was directly in the path at St. Mary's Cemetery.
And the first place we went to was to check our little sister's grave. I remember trees down everywhere.
And we had to go dig all the grass up around her grave.
While not the longest, widest, or strongest tornado of all time, the 1967 Oak Lawn F4 is the deadliest tornado in Chicago's history. What made this tornado so unique was that it went through one of the most densely populated parts of Chicago, and really the entire country. The tornado was witnessed by thousands of people, impacting the places where so many frequented on a daily basis. And it was my family's story about this tornado that was the initial seed that eventually grew into my passion for tornadoes. After the Oaklawn F4, it wasn't long until the Chicago area was struck once again. This time, the town of Joliet would be the victim of a particularly strange event. On April 6, 1972, after dark, a tornado formed west of Joliet heading straight for town. Right as the tornado moved into town, another tornado formed, this one even stronger. This tornado hurled a Ferris wheel more than 200 feet across a parking lot onto a car. To top it all off, a third tornado formed just south of the second tornado. Extensive damage occurred at Joliet Municipal Airport, where at least 50 planes were damaged or destroyed. 3 tornadoes like this going through a densely populated town is an extremely strange occurrence. However, 4 years later, Chicago saw an even stranger tornado. On June 13, 1976, afternoon temperatures hovered in the lower to middle 80s, just like any other summer day. Little did people know, chaos was about to break loose. At 5:18 p.m., a strong tornado developed just north of downtown Lamont. From this point, the tornado began to take an erratic path, first heading southeast through the eastern side of town. During this time, the tornado was growing more and more ferocious, causing extensive damage to the Hillcrest subdivision. From there, the storm began heading in a northerly direction, crossing the Des Plaines River and then moving towards Argonne National Laboratory, where the tornado ripped the roof off of a nuclear reactor. The tornado then crossed I-55, where it inflicted even more damage before finally dissipating. 2 satellite anticyclonic tornadoes that spun in the opposite direction were also produced by the storm. The tornado was on the ground for 1 hour. However, the total distance traveled was only 8 miles. Further research showed that at times this tornado was nearly stationary. In the storm's wake, 2 lives were lost, while 23 were injured. The final rating of the tornado was an F4 on the Fujita scale, and on the same day, another storm produced an extremely strong and erratic family of tornadoes near the town of Jordan, Iowa. Most notably, the Jordan F5. Although this tornado had a higher rating, it caused 0 fatalities due to its rural track. All fatalities on this day were caused by the Lamont F4. But that's not the end of the story. Only 2 years later, on August 7th, 1978, another tornado formed in Lamont and went right through Argonne National Laboratory, impacting the same exact nuclear reactor. Fortunately, this tornado was not nearly as strong as the 1976 F4 and was only rated F2. But still, the Argonne National Laboratory didn't dodge 2 bullets, it was hit by 2 bullets, but still continues operation to this day. Next is perhaps the most infamous tornado to ever strike the Chicago region. On August 28, 1990, a violent F5 tornado formed in Oswego and moved southeast, striking the town of Plainfield, Illinois, taking the lives of 29 while injuring over 350. The tornado left a 16.5-mile-long path, which ranged from 600 yards all the way up to half a mile in width. The Plainfield tornado was extremely unique and holds many records that still stand to this day. It was the first tornado ever greater than an F3 rating to occur during the month of August in Illinois, and it is still the only F or EF5 rated tornado documented in the United States during the month of August, and remains the only F or EF5 tornado to occur in the Chicagoland area. This tornado was also quite mysterious. For one, it approached from the northwest, while most tornadoes approach from the southwest. Low clouds and rain shrouded the tornado, making it nearly impossible to see. Because of this, no known photographs or video of this tornado exist, despite happening in 1990, well after cameras became widely available. There are only 2 videos taken of this storm, and in both videos, you can see just how powerful this storm was. But there are no images of the actual tornado itself, adding to the mystery surrounding this strange tornado. There is also controversy surrounding the way the National Weather Service handled this tornado. Despite many clear indications of an ongoing tornado, a tornado warning was never issued, leaving the people in the path with no warning for what was coming their way. This tornado was also studied by Dr. Ted Fujita. His survey is responsible for the highly detailed mapping of the tornado damage path. Nowadays, tornado research is mostly associated with the state of Oklahoma. However, the research of tornadoes actually used to be centered in Chicago. This is largely in part due to Dr. Ted Fujita's work at the University of Chicago. Fujita was originally from Japan, where he initially studied and taught at Kyushu Institute of Technology before he was invited by the University of Chicago in 1953. His research at the University of Chicago on severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, hurricanes, and typhoons revolutionized the field of meteorology. Fujita remained at the University of Chicago until his retirement in 1990. He would later die in 1998 in his Chicago home. Even though he was born and raised in Japan, he always had a special bond with the city. During his time there, he closely studied the tornadoes within the Chicago area, creating this absolutely beautiful graphic showing all of the tornado paths as well as some other statistics regarding tornadoes in the Chicagoland area. This graphic only includes tornadoes up to 1982, so it does not include the Plainfield F5. Also, you can clearly see the two tornadoes that struck Argonne National Laboratory. But on March 27, 1991, another track would be added to the region. Right before 5 p.m., a tornado formed just west of Lockport, Illinois. It traveled northeast through Romeoville and was heading straight for Argonne National Laboratory for the third time. But just before the tornado struck the lab, it turned to the east and instead went through the center of Lamont, crossing the path of the 1976 F4. Fortunately, this tornado did not cause any fatalities, but it did injure 7. After this tornado, between 1992 and 2020, the Chicago region went through a serious lull in tornado activity, completely devoid of any tornado above EF2 strength. But in 2021, that cold streak came to an end. During the late evening of June 20th, storms rapidly increased in intensity as they moved towards the Chicago region, producing damaging winds and 4 tornadoes. While the tornadoes seemed to be embedded in a line of storms, which is not normally associated with strong tornadoes, but upon closer inspection of the radar data, it shows that there was actually an individual supercell riding along a front, which may explain what happened next. A powerful tornado formed on the east side of Naperville, quickly increasing in intensity as it moved into Woodridge. The tornado continued over Darien, Burr Ridge, and Willow Springs, lifting at 11:25 p.m. Ultimately, the tornado was given a rating of EF3 because of the damage it did to one home in Woodridge, Illinois. This home was completely leveled by the tornado, and if we look closer, it's clear the reason why the home was leveled was because the home's garage was exactly perpendicular to the tornadic winds, resulting in the catastrophic failure of the 2-story home. This tornado occurred less than 10 miles from my childhood home, which I was coincidentally staying at the time. So the next morning, I surveyed the tornado damage, which is this footage you're seeing here. The next year, on July 12, 2023, Chicago was once again in the middle of a tornado outbreak. The first tornado of the day hit extremely close to home. This tornado formed in Burr Ridge and moved northeast right over the gym where I used to work out. It continued northeast over I-294 and I-55, moving right over Sherman Park, a park I used to have soccer practice in. The tornado also nearly impacted one of my best friend's home, but more importantly, it almost hit my favorite burrito place, Fajitas. The tornado continued going over the shopping areas of Countryside, directly impacting the Walmart Supercenter before heading northeast right along Joliet Road, moving through Lyons and eventually dissipating in Stickney, Illinois. This tornado, while not exactly the strongest, was extremely photogenic, and because it was underneath a low precipitation supercell, it could have been seen from downtown Chicago. For me personally, it was surreal to watch this storm on radar, moving through the area I grew up in